Hi everybody, Matt Lawton here, and this is the Astrological Winds channel and a special edition of the blog. I'm going to look at the solstice chart today, set for Washington, D.C. And I do this every quarter. It's a mundane reading and looking at the next quarter of the United States and what we can expect will be the main things going on and taking the attention of the United States. So, just a couple things first. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog that I do on YouTube, and it's usually a weekly blog. This is my special quarterly one. If you like what you see, please become a follower and remember to turn on your notifications to do so. These blogs are also available on podcasts. Just look up on your favorite podcast, the Astrological Winds channel. You should be able to find it. It's been growing a lot on the podcast, according to Buzzsprout. I appreciate that. Also, Instagram has the Astrological Winds channel page. So if you have Instagram, become a follower there. It'll show up on your newsreel there. Or if you have Facebook, you can friend me at Matthew with two T's, Lawton, Lauten, and I will. It'll show up in newsreel every week there too. Best place to find it is on my website, and that is www.astrologicalwinds.com, where I embed all my blogs up on the top. Look at the blogs tab. And that's also the place where you can find all my professional services. If you can support me when you need, or someone you know needs some kind of professional astrological reading, all my services are available there. I've been doing them for over 20 years, trained professionally for 7 years. So really would love to do that. And also right now, if you give a donation to the blog of $5, I enter you into a raffle to win a free reading. So every $5 you give is another chance. And you can do that at Venmo. My handle there is at the symbol A with the circle, Matthew with a capital M, two T's in Matthew, and then hyphen in the middle, Lawton, Lauten. That's a capital Lauten. Or Cash App is $ Matthew Lawton, all one word, capital M, and then it's ATTHEW, capital LAUTEN. All right, let's talk about this chart. And I've been doing these quarterly at the solstice or equinox charts for over 20 years to look at the US's next quarter coming up, and very effective tool of showing what's happening for the US in the next quarter usually. So want to do it again. And this chart was to me a very, very interesting chart. I mean, two things that immediately, jump off the page to me on this chart is, we have a Scorpio rising, and Mars being the ruler of that is conjunct the descendant. And then notice how much is out here in the 6th, 7th, and 8th houses as far as the planets go. So it shows that a lot of the US's attention and energy is going to be on enemies and allies. And, the US right now is very much in the middle of this conflicts with Israel and Palestine, and also Russia and Ukraine. So this shows that a lot of our energy is going to be spent dealing with those situations over this summer. Excuse me. So the Scorpio ascendant, first of all, is, we're just feeling very, the ascendant in the first house in a mundane chart represents, I'm sorry about that, wrong chart now. Okay. It represents the way people are feeling in the nation in general. Like, how is the collective actually feeling? And so Scorpio, obviously, it's feeling a very deep, emotional, intense times are going on for the US right now. And, and people are feeling like there's a lot of manipulation going on. There's a lot of things to be fearful of. There's a lot of obsessed type of energy, holding on to like what their true family and values are, and like use of power but a lot of drama and passion going on too. And what's interesting to me about this is like, first off, Pallas Athene is in the first house, and it shows that a lot of this passion and drama and stuff going on like this has to do with disagreements on principles and ideas and values. And when you think about the United States, and really now it's been, a long time now, that the difference between the two major political parties and their followers has become so dichotomized over what they value or supposedly value. And so it's very interesting to me that, here's this intense Scorpio energy coming in, and Palace is in there. And to me, it shows like a lot of the disagreements, maybe like just its internal stuff too. Like what's causing strife in the nation is an inability of these two political parties to have any common ground and to like constantly be attacking one another, ruthless, underhanded, and that filters down to the followers of those two parties who are most of the voters. There's not too many people who don't vote at all, so they're choosing one of these sides, and that's how they, so they're feeling a lot of drama, a lot of intensity, a lot of emotion about what they believe in, and wanting to keep the purity of what they believe in, and circle the wagon, so to speak. And here we are. Mars is the ruler of this chart, and I'm going to jump across at the other side of the chart right away and skip some of these other houses and come back to them, because Mars is tied into where all the action is going on this side of the chart, which is the chart of relationships. And in a mundane chart of a country, that's our allies, that's our enemies. Those are the countries that we're working with as either in together or against, in a very open way. And so Mars is in very weak condition in Taurus. It's in detriment traditionally. And to me, this is like really meaning the circling of the wagons around resources will be a big thing coming up. And very like conservative position of the United States of protecting their own resources, and just like being very stubborn and fixed, especially in relation to, in this case, our allies and our enemies, and what we're going to do with resources. And obviously that's the big issue here. The US isn't directly involved, but they're providing resources to one side in each of these wars, which is getting our enemies really upset, Uranus in the seventh house, at us about what we're doing. They feel like, we're basically, out there blatantly doing what we want to do in relation to that. So it's like, and what's interesting too, Mars is actually in the sixth house, right? And the sixth house in the mundane chart represents the military, it represents the police, it represents civil servants. So the question is like, what is going to be the greater involvement in those people, and possibly these conflicts that we're at, or even at home? Like, is there going to be greater involvement of the military and police and civil servants at home in reaction to a lot of the division and the passion and drama and the stuff going on underneath that? So very interesting way of opening this chart up, and why that energy is feeling that way. Now, when you look at that seventh house again, here you have both Uranus and Jupiter in the seventh house. Now, in different signs, and freedom is to do what we want, is what that says there. The US is basically saying, hey, we're going to do whatever we want to do in relation to our allies and enemies. And with Uranus in there in Taurus, here we are, a lot of the battle probably is about resources, actually. And then also like giving them the the technology that they need to fight in these battles and in these wars that they're at. But Uranus in the seventh means that our allies, not never mind just our enemies, but our allies are even seeing us as unpredictable, unreliable, very individualistic, very impulsive about what we're doing, like just making the situation worse by upsetting the situation and creating more chaos out of the situation. So, so that's really like confusing. And then here's the Jupiter too in Gemini, where it's literally in a sign of weakness where they're not even sure if we're telling them the truth of what our agenda is, the information that the U.S. is putting out there. Is it actually even the truth? Um, is one of the things the Jupiter in Gemini, it brings up as a question. So very interesting energy there. And then interesting enough too, Taurus is the ruler of the seventh house, and it goes back to being ruled by Venus in Cancer, and US is a Cancer country. And so that's all about, once again, protecting our own resources, making sure that we're taken care of. And it's interesting that it's in the eighth house too, because it's in the house of international finance, and so like that's one of the ways that like Saudi Arabia leaving the dollar. That's one of the ways that we're being fought too on this front, like that we're being fought through international finance, through banking, through things like that, where other countries who have influence over our system or even corporations can become a challenge in that area for us. So, interestingly enough too, notice that the sun is conjunct the Venus too, which is the ruler of that seventh house. So, like right now, the president, that shows the president who's represented by the sun, is very much behind a lot of the confusion and chaos and the arming of our allies and the fighting of our, he's very much a big piece of that puzzle. And so, it's interesting too. And then also the Mercury is up there too. Before I move on, the Mercury is also in the eighth house. So like getting our message out there to the financial world that we are going to take care of ourselves and protect ourselves and do what we want to do. Once again, like some very patriotic sign, Cancer. And when we got three of the inner planets on it, they're all going to circle the wagons around that stuff. Now, it's interesting, though, to me, is that conjunction actually could bring some good fortune for the U.S. through international markets and banking, where we might actually be able to gain some power there, But we have to be really careful, too, allowing a lot of our decisions on those areas to be dictated by our emotions, by our memories, by the things that we've had before and what we're used to before. And that's seeing how we're so involved in this whole thing. And go back to that sixth house a little bit too, not only with the Mars in there, but also Chiron's conjunct Eris in that sixth house. And here we have chaos and wounding that comes from changes that are going on. And once again, this is the house of the military, this is the house of the police, this is the house of civil servants. So are they going to become involved in some of these wars, or is there going to be they become involved in domestic strife that is just chaotic situations that end up getting casualties or a wounding of the nation, and literally the health of the nation, very much, likely having to mainly do with Israel and Ukraine and the things that how we're backing them up. It's interesting too on this one too. It shows you how tied in this stuff is. The Chiron is exactly trying the MC. So it's we do have the ability to bring healing to these situations on the world stage if we want to do that. But right now we're bringing a lot of chaos and because of the Eris there too. So very interesting, just like how this chart immediately sets up with the Scorpio ascendant and going across the chart to the Mars ruler, and then all this stuff clustered in the sixth, seventh, and eighth houses just show to me means there's going to be an awful lot of involvement with our allies, with our enemies, the moving around and using of finances, international finances, and international banking to push our agenda also. And that actually may be beneficial to us. But the possibility that our military and our police and civil servants may become more involved with conflict, with possibly those conflicts, or maybe an internal strife type conflict. So I want to go back and just look at the rest of the chart. This is really like the big gist of this chart is like we're going to be spending an awful lot of the time in the U.S. involved in these conflicts and involved in the internal conflict of the split in the value systems in the U.S. and the drama and intensity that that will bring up. Now, the second house is the resources of the nation, and the assets and things like that. And you can see the moon is in Sag there. And what I think is interesting about that is the moon represents the people. And in Sag, it shows that people are trying to think out of the box here. They're trying to find new ways to make money, to make assets. So a lot of cutting edge type stuff, business can bring that kind of energy in. And we may see some of the very innovative things come in on that level. But notice this, that moon is square Saturn in the fourth house. And to me, that means there's actually possibly going to be restrictions to the ability of people to make these steps that they're taking on their own into successful businesses during this quarter, because there's just going to be a lot of blockage from authorities. And not only that, with Saturn in the fourth house, it shows that the real estate market may be starting to shrink or fall or contract is a good way to say it. And we know how much that's a big part of the US and its ability to keep creating new economy, new businesses that feed that second house. Sag is the ruler of that house. And once again, that makes Sag is on the cusp of that house. That makes Jupiter the ruler of that house. And Jupiter is once again in a weak position in Gemini. It's in detriment, and so it's very interesting that, once again, that shows that we may have good plans and stuff, but they may not be ready for the timing of things. They may not be quite ready in this time to push us, or there may be other things that block us that we're not aware of, or even maybe open warfare could stop a lot of the ability to create new business and things like that. Just I wanted to talk about a little bit on that, a little bit more on that fourth house too. I had Saturn there because Saturn's actually the ruler of the fourth house too. And the fourth house does represent land, agriculture, and real estate, and even nationalism. And so once again, you have Saturn in a divided sign, nationalism, squaring the moon, restriction, and it shows that, the real estate market may contract this, and also, I think with the moon square Saturn and the moon in a fire sign, we could have issues with agriculture from too much heat feeding really big storms. Pisces is stormy weather that's wet. So the heat generating a lot of storms could create a lot of agricultural damage in this summer. And like I said, Saturn is actually ruling that house too. So I think we're going to see some contraction in those areas. Going back to the third house, which represents our transportation systems, our educational system, our communications, our media, you can see here, first off, once again, Saturn's the ruler. And I just told you that Saturn's not in good position. So right away, there's some restrictions, there's some blockages, there's some stuff going on. And the Ceres is in there too. It's just the asteroid that represents what we need, and it's retrograde and so like both Pluto and Ceres are in there, and it makes me think, is there going to be some kind of event that really threatens our abilities at times to communicate or get around, that like there's some kind of restriction or limits to the ideals that we have there. And there could be, and with Pluto in there, does that mean there's some kind of destruction that may occur to some of those systems? Like, will there be like, some storm that destroys some of the transportation? Will there be some kind of like attack or sunspot explosion that blows out some of the communications, things like that? So very, very interesting energy there in the third house too. And then the Pluto does trine Jupiter, but it's like a trine that's already beyond and separating. So I don't think that's going to have a lot of too much of an influence on it in all honesty. And then go over to the fifth house. And the fifth house is ruled, it's Pisces on the cusp, which means it's ruled by Jupiter, but it also co-ruled by Neptune, which is actually in the fifth house itself. And then we also have the North Node in the fifth house also. So I think this is an interesting one too, because it means that people are identifying with pop influences, with people who bring us entertainment, and so like these people are being identified as leaders many times in this culture, and they are speaking many times from their true ideals and values. They're using their fame to like influence what they can, according to the value systems that they have. So I think we'll see a lot of that. And I can just think of like, one of those things, when you think of like Taylor Swift, where she's backing up the current Biden administration, or so it said. So like, what kind of influence does that have? Her ideals, is it going to bring people out there and rallying around in a group with common goals over those ideals? Very interesting there. Going to the ninth house now, because we talked about the sixth, seventh, and eighth, and that's once again, that's our courts. That's our justice system. That's our higher education system. That's international travel and things like that. And once again, it's interesting. Vesta is in the ninth house, the asteroid Vesta, and that's like like ritualistic type sharing of behavior, and that's something that definitely does go on in the courts. But what's interesting to me about this one is the moon in Sag once again is the ruler, because Cancer is on the cusp of this. And what I see that as is that people are perceiving the courts as like pursuing their own agenda with their own beliefs. It's like Sagittarius is like that preacher up on the pulpit who's like the bully pulpit. So like people are perceiving the courts as being that, like just forcing their rulings down on people, even if it's not like what even the majority would prefer. It's almost like a bullying that's going on that level. And once again too, this is stuff that could also affect higher education systems, international travel systems, where once, and remember that moon in Sag is square Saturn, so there can be a bunch of restrictions, feeling restricted once again by the older white male of the courts, and the whole system that Saturn represents, and the ideals that are behind that, the Pisces energy that's behind that. So very interesting there. The 10th house is the house of the executive branch. Interestingly enough, Leo on the cusp means the sun, which represents also the executive branch, is the ruler of that house. And I've already talked about how the sun is in pretty good condition in the sense of like conjunct Venus and Mercury, and like maybe getting some popularity out of that. But what is interesting too is it is coming from separating from a square with Neptune, which shows that there's like a lot of the president's messaging is misunderstood. and that there could be issues with him, just not like supposedly having so much of a grip cognitively, and therefore like a lot of misunderstandings that come in there. Um, but otherwise, the Sun conjunct Venus and Mercury shows that, yeah, he is still being liked by certain people. He still is coming across as someone who cares for, people, and, and therefore he is getting some gains there. In the 11th house, we have the South Node. And that's very interesting to me because the 11th house represents Congress and the South Node represents being stuck in your old ways. And, that is a perfect description of Congress and the inability to like adjust to the times. And I think we're just going to see that continue once again, like just stuck, not moving forward, really, just a lot of disagreement. And Mercury in Cancer is the ruler of that chart. So the disagreement is emotional in its base. Like it's like, on one side, it's kind of like the mom apple pie baseball thing, and on the other side it's more like, well, this is a melting pot, this is like supposed to be the great experiment, kind of thing. So very, very interesting there. And then the 12th house, which is our institutions, the large government institutions that serve us, we have nothing in that house, but Libra is on the cusp, which means Venus is the ruler. And like I said, Venus is in a very caring sign. It's in a sign it likes to be in. So I think, the institutions of the US will do a good job of caring for people in this next quarter. And really a lot of it is going to be just like out of duty, a patriotic duty to the people of the country. So I really think this chart is showing that the US is going to be very much involved in the Israel Palestine conflict and the Russia Ukraine conflict very densely this summer, this next quarter, and really maybe trying to push our own agenda, be very confusing to both our allies and our enemies. We're probably using a lot of sleight of hand deception and doing that. And we may see our military, get involved in this, or get involved with maybe like even against its own people in trying to control things. But a very, very interesting and possibly intense chart coming up, a quarter coming up, that is, based on this chart. All right, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological News Channel. This is a free video blog I do on YouTube, and regularly it's a weekly forecast, but I do these quarterly mundane solstice and equinox charts to look at the US for the next quarter. So that's what this special edition was about. And remember, you can catch my blog also on all kinds of blogs, and not just YouTube. It's about out there on podcasts, so you can just like look it up on your favorite podcast, Astrological Winds Channel. You'll find it out there. Ditto with Instagram. It's on Instagram too. And I always embed all the blogs on my website, www.astrologicalwinds.com. That's also where I have all my services listed. I've been a professional astrologer for over 20 years, trained for 7 years professionally, done many, many hundreds, probably thousands of charts, really. And we'd love to do that for you or someone when you're ready for it. Other services available too. Just check the website. All right, should be an interesting summer for the U.S. Hopefully we don't get mired down too much in conflict, but it looks like we're going to be spending an awful lot of our energy on these conflicts going on in the world. I will see you all on Monday for the weekly blog. Until then, take care.